Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Mike Clark. We'll give everyone a few moments to get logged in, just another couple seconds. There's a quick poll up. If you guys could vote, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for voting. We appreciate that. Just to kind of share the results of the poll, the question was, if you're running an AG and how do you handle SQL Agent Jobs? 19% said enable, disable jobs manually. 11% said they do that automatically. About 50% said they had a script in the job to determine if it should run on this particular replica or not. And 22% they don't do anything specific to deal with this issue. Anyway, that's good relevant information for today's session. Again, my name is Mike Clark. Today's topic is your AG might not be as available as you think. Our speaker today is Joseph Fleming, and we're in for a very good session today. This is a very timely issue. Our sponsor is HVR Software, and we do appreciate their support. These are online sessions, and they're it's great. We can meet at any time. There is overhead involved in this, and HVR support helps enable all these things going on at PASS, especially the DBA virtual chapter. Speaking of PASS, PASS Summit's coming up. It seems to be a long ways away, but it may not be for some. It's this November 5th to 8th. If you register now, you can actually use a discount code called DBAVC and save yourself $150. The code is here on the screen, and it's on our website. If you wanted to save $150, please enter that code in your registration to save $150.
Hey, Mike.
Yes, sir.
If you could back up for 1 second there, I believe DBAVC is the name of your chapter, but you want to use the code that's in the next line.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, the code is VGD ISKGOE. It's kind of a mouthful, but if you go to our website, it'll be there for you. Yeah. Good catch, sir, Joe. Thank you, sir. And with that, also, they just announced just a week or two ago the pre-conference session. So those of you who have not gone before, the session PASS Summit itself is November 5th to 8th. It's those 4 days, but there's also a pre-conference Monday and Tuesday generally. And they have top-notch speakers from around the world sharing their insights. Those are all-day sessions, and so those are an additional registration fee and so forth. But if you go to pass.org and click on the summit, you can see all the pre-conference sessions and sign up for those that interest you. If you use our registration code for the main session, you have $150 available to apply for a pre-con, which those are really good. I really enjoy those as well. And I'm not sure if any of you have the wonderful task of running with SQL Server 2008, as you know, and probably heard that it's actually going out of full support. And so Microsoft itself is doing a full court press to try and help folks migrate to a more modern platform. And so they actually have a session coming up tomorrow, May 9th. So if you go to pass.org and and click on a SQL Server migration, you can sign up for one of those sessions. And I highly encourage that if you have any 2008 databases sitting around. One of the other things that PASS does is they have a SQL Saturday. It's kind of a mini PASS Summit. It's a 1-day event that's just scattered with all kinds of different topics. And our speaker today actually has been spoken at several SQL Saturdays and one just a couple of weeks ago. So they're a very good source of information, as well as a chance to meet folks and network and get to meet other SQL Server professionals. They're a really nice group. And this is the DBA virtual chapter. There are other virtual chapters underneath the PASS umbrella. Almost any topic and idea that that you have an interest in is available. From cloud to, of course, language specific, whether it's Hebrew or Spanish. If you're in VM or data architecture or even DevOps, all things that are very interesting. You can sign up and get and participate in those. If there's something here that you're interested in that you don't actually see a virtual group, you're free to propose that one is created, and most likely you would help head that up if you had the idea and the passion. PASS is volunteer-run organization, so if you have an idea that you think is good, most likely PASS will accept that, and you're on your way to becoming involved, being a dedicated volunteer for PASS. And there's many different ways to kind of stay connected with PASS, from Facebook to Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those things. Again, if you go to pass.org, you can sign up. It's a free membership, and then you have full access to all of these other venues to reach out to other SQL Server professionals. And with that, we want to jump right into today's session. As we mentioned, today's session is about your AG might not be as available as you think it is. Today's presenter is Joseph Fleming. I can read his bio. You guys read his bio, but Joe is a senior consultant at Straight Path Solutions, a really great company, by the way. A full disclosure, I work for Straight Path Solutions as well. So Joe and I are co-workers. Joe's has over 20 years of database mishaps under his belt. He specializes in HADR, performance tuning, and a whole bunch of weird problems. Joe's a great guy. He's got good experience. He's been working with SQL Server 6.5 and beyond, and we're looking forward to today's session, Joe. And I want to read his last line here. By sharing his wacky misadventures with you, he hopes to make you smile and hopefully avoid some future tears. And that is actually one of the main goals of all that we do here on the virtual chapters, to kind of help avoid mistakes and stubbing the toe and banging your head, and no one can do it like Joe. With that, Joe, I'm going to pass the baton to you, sir.
Okay, Mike, I'm going to need you to put me back as a presenter because I don't have the option to share my screen again.
Yeah, here we are.
There we go. And once I confirm that Mike can see my screen, we'll get going. Mike, are you able to see everything?
Joe. Yep, your
wonderful. Thank you, and welcome everybody. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about availability groups and some of the gotchas that can catch you basically because of your availability group. We're going to skip the intro of me, since we already posted my bio up, and start talking right away about how great availability groups are. You can keep all of your databases synchronized, either fully or asynchronously. You can have, depending on your version, up to 5 replicas, maybe even up to 8 now. And several of them can be synchronous, with the rest being unsynchronous. They can do an automatic failover, so that if something happens to your server, one of your synchronous replicas can pick up right away and continue serving your workload for you. You can use your secondary replicas for reporting or other read-heavy tasks. For example, index fragmentation analysis. If you've got a large database and you're trying to do index defrags, sometimes you just don't have the bandwidth or the available overhead on your server to figure out which indexes need to be rebuilt or defragmented. And so you can actually do that work on your secondary replica because it's identical. One of the really awesome parts about availability groups is that you can use a wizard. You just create new availability group wizard and build the availability group kind of having your hand held the whole way. So it makes it easy to set up. However, like all things that are easy to set up, availability groups do have some gotchas and a little bit of extra overhead that a lot of people don't think about. So an availability group synchronizes your databases only. So as you can see in my image there, my SPICE database will be synchronized with all of my secondary replicas. But all of the things on the right there, my logins, my linked servers, my SQL Server Agent Jobs, my alerts, and my operators, none of those things get automatically synchronized. And I have to put up a caveat for this. Once you are able to go to SQL Server 2019, they are introducing new functionality, which is not out for testing yet, but they revealed it during the SQL Server 2019 Roadshow. And they're actually going to have a way for you to put your system databases into an availability group so that indeed all of these objects will get synchronized. But until then, we're going to walk you through some processes that will help you make sure that those stay in sync and that you know what's happening with them. So we've got logins, jobs, linked servers, alerts, and operators. Where do those things reside? What am I going to do with them? Right. So let's start with SQL Server logins and the things that can go wrong if you don't keep your logins synchronized. The table that we're dealing with is sys.server principals located in master. Your SQL-based logins, as opposed to Windows logins, are assigned a random SID when they're created. It's a GUID, and it is indeed very random unless you specify the SID that you want to use. So a database will map that SQL login to a database login using that SID. And if you have different SIDs for the same SQL login across different servers, you're kind of out of luck. So if you just go in using the GUI or just using create login and build yourself a SQL login, and you do that across all of your replicas without specifying the SID parameter, you will get different SIDs and none of them, so when you fail over, your database SID won't match up with the server level SID, and that person won't be able to connect to your availability group database anymore. And you will dutifully go in and you'll use the function sp change users login, and you will fix it, and it will be fixed until the next time it fails over to a different replica, at which time you will have the same problem again. So the solution to that is to drop and recreate your login using the SID parameter so that everybody has the same SID everywhere. Unfortunately, there's another parameter for your login that you're not going to be able to easily compare, and that's the password. Passwords are encrypted by default. You can't look at them. You can't really, I mean, maybe you can crack them. I certainly haven't been able to, but you're going to have to manually test your password in order to make sure that they link up. But I like to use a little script out on the internet called sp_help_rev login, and it will script out the login on your primary server, and you can simply copy and paste that script at your destination servers or your replica servers, and that will build them identically in each place. Obviously, if you've got database permissions assigned outside of your availability group databases, you will have to reassign those, but it will let you drop and recreate the login and make sure the password matches and make sure the SID matches. Everything will then match up and your failover will have no SQL Server login issues. Next, after logins, we have linked servers. Linked servers are a really great way for you to be able to start a query on one server and get some data from a database on another server, or an Excel file or a Microsoft Access database or an Oracle or a MySQL database. They've got a lot of great uses. They're also misused an awful lot, but I'm not going to dive into that very much. Needless to say, if your link servers aren't there after you do a failover, the users are going to get a little angry because they're going to want to query that data and they're going to get a bunch of error messages. In addition to that, in order to run the script that we will cover later, you're going to need a linked server for each replica in your availability group. And that's just how the script works. It's how it's able to make its comparisons. So next thing, whenever you have a link server, you're going to want to make sure your SPNs are good, or you will have Kerberos issues. Now, SPNs and Kerberos are a whole completely other topic. SPN stands for Service Principal Name, and it's how when you're jumping across servers, that Windows is able to keep track of and pass along your credentials. So if you don't have those good, you will probably experience problems, possibly with my script, and definitely with your other linked servers. And the linked server table, which is master.sys.servers, has the name of the server, a bunch of information about the connection string, and then options like RPC enabled, is your collation compatible, and etc. And we'll see later how those stack up. Now, I think probably the most important thing and the most likely thing to cause you problems with your availability group are your SQL Server Agent Jobs. You can find these in the MSDB database under DBO Sys Jobs. And in an availability group, you kind of need a way for your job to know if it should be running or not on that replica. If you're on a secondary replica, you can't run jobs that are going to manipulate data in your availability group databases because they're read-only. If you have 5 or 6 replicas, you probably don't want your backups running on each of those replicas either. So one way that people take care of that problem, and it looks like about half of you are doing this already, is there's a script that you can put as the first step of your job. And I have a link here, and the presentation will be available afterwards, so you can pick up this link and pull it. And is basically what it does is it checks to see whether you are the primary replica or not, and whether you are, if you are the primary replica, the job will continue. If you aren't the primary replica, it will issue a stop command to itself, and so the job will immediately stop without an error. Now, if you needed to be creative and figure out, if I'm the readable secondary and other things, you can modify this to suit your environment. But at the basic level, if you want to run, if you're the primary, great. It's got a way for you to tell if you are in a 2-node. If you're run only on the secondary, it works as well. So, all right. So underneath your SQL Server Agent job, you have other items, right? So you have, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead of myself. So your job has several parameters just in the sysjobs table. The basic stuff, the name and category of your job, and the operational stuff like, is it enabled? Who do we notify and under what conditions, whether it's a notify on failure, completion, or success? How do we notify them? And do we delete the job on completion? Which may seem a little redundant here, but I have seen jobs that are built to run, one time a week from now and then delete themselves. And you may or may not want to have that job also running on your secondary servers. But as always, my goal here is to kind of give you information, and you get to choose what to do with that information. You get to choose how you want to take action. So for every job, for it to do actually anything at all, you need some job steps. Those steps can be found in the sysjob steps table in the MSDB database. And your step is going to have a name, the type of command. For example, is it an SSIS package? Is this a transact SQL job? Is this an operating system command using XP Command Shell? that sort of a thing. Once you've decided on the type, you'd have to know what the command is, and then the process flow for this command. On success, am I just going to move to the next job step? Am I going to quit the job? On a failure, am I going to quit the job? Am I going to move to a different job step? That sort of thing. And then whether or not there's going to be any logging. So that's all handled in the job steps table. Leading after that, you will find the job schedule table, which is in the MSDB database still, and it's called Sys Job Schedules. It has the name of the schedule. It has when it runs, which is made up of a lot of run interval columns, which I can't decode just by looking at them. I'll usually just have to pull up the schedule in the GUI in order to find that. And then whether or not the schedule is enabled and their effective and expiration dates for the schedule. After we get done with the SQL jobs, an important part of those jobs, especially if they have notifications, are your operators, also found in the MSDB database in a table called Sys Operators. You have the operator name, whether they're enabled, what their email address. For those people who are still using pagers, their pager address and the pager on duty schedule for them. An interesting note about the operator table is that it has so you add operators using either the GUI or a SQL Server command, but you don't get to specify the operator ID. There's no way with the operator, unlike with your logins, for you to set up and say, I wanted to use this ID. It's simply an incremented value, an identity value in the Sys Operators table, which means when we're trying to look and see if the same operators exist, we can't compare them by ID. So my script is actually looking at the operator's name and the details that follow, because the other thing is that when you're selecting that operator in your job, you're also not selecting it by ID, you're selecting your operators by name. So it still works out, even though Microsoft doesn't give us an easy way to adjust the operator ID. We also have alerts in the Sys Alerts table in the MSDB database, which have, just like everything else, a name, the source of the alert, whether it's a performance counter, a SQL Server condition, a critical error, that sort of a thing. And then what are we going to do when that alert happens? Are we going to send someone a notification? Are we going to run a SQL Server job? If we're sending a notification, who are we sending it to? If we're running a job, which job are we running? So all of those things are captured in the alerts table. So to handle all of this, I built a script that you set up and run. It uses the linked servers that you set up to your availability group replicas, and it will compare all the objects that we just talked about. From that comparison, what you'll see is a table with a list of the objects that are different in your environment. For each object that has a difference, there's a column in there that has a query that you can run that will show you all of the differences that we found. And then you decide which value is valid and which one needs changing. So why don't we just push those changes out? We're running on the primary replica. We just want to make all the secondary replicas look like the primary replica, right? Well, maybe, but maybe not. And so by empowering you guys as administrators to see those differences first, you get the opportunity to learn new and exciting things about your availability group, such as, hey, someone else is messing with my availability group and adjusting my jobs or my linked servers or my logins without telling me about it, right? Without making some assumptions, there's no way for my script to know what is the actual correct version of the job. And when you make assumptions, there's a certain phrase that comes to mind, and I've highlighted it here. But if you want to Google this phrase here, oops, I went the wrong way. Back up. If you want to Google the thing that happens when you when you make an assumption or when you assume. You might find some funny videos there. However, if you really just want to force apply all of your changes from your primary to your secondary replicas, Jonathan Caius at SQL Skills written an SSMS add-in that will do those things for you. And I have a link to it right here, so that you basically can right-click and push the changes across without looking. But having shown you all of that, let's cut into my virtual machines and kind of see how this process works. Just going to make this a little bit bigger for easier viewing, but what you can see here is I have my script opened, and we'll start at the top. No, yes, we will. We'll start at the top with a couple of the tables that are, or a couple things that are commented out right away. So first thing I did before I started this demo was I truncated my exceptions table. And so I have a table set up with exceptions for items that you cannot synchronize simply because of what they are, or things that you know that you don't want to check for synchronization. For example, just because you have a server with an availability group on it doesn't mean that all of your databases are in the availability group. So you may have databases that you have jobs specifically for these outside of availability groups databases, and you don't need to check them for synchronization against your replicas. So you can add those there. You can add operators and or link servers there the same way. And I'll give you a little demonstration of that as we move down. The first thing you need to do is declare the name of your availability group. Because you can have more than one, and different availability groups could have different replicas. So we're going to declare and set the name of our availability group, which I've named Melange AG, because I favor the series of books by Frank Herbert called Dune. So most of my virtual machines have some sort of a callback to the Dune novels. At the start, we just got kind of a set of comments telling you which tables we're going to synchronize, and then we're going to move into the very first thing we're going to do is look and make sure that you gave me a good availability group name. If you didn't, we're going to throw an error. But then we're going to create a temporary table basically for our unmatched objects, and then we're going to create a table variable to insert into just to hold those members of our availability group. And then, yes, we're going to use the dreaded cursor to cursor through these things. There's really not, you're going to be using some sort of looping logic. There's really not a good set-based way to grab this information, since we're going to be reaching out across link server objects. So a cursor it is. So we're going to start with jobs, and then I've built a series of queries. Now, I'm going to run you through a couple of these queries to kind of give you an idea what they look like, but by no means is it really worth everybody's time for me to read queries for each one of the objects. But so we're going to build a command that uses an accept clause. And if you're not familiar with the accept clause, what this does is it says, give me all of the rows in the first select statement that are not matched by a row in the second select statement. So what does that mean in terms of running this? What that means is if you run this from the primary and there's a job on the secondary that does not exist on the primary, we're not going to catch it. In order to catch that job, you will have to actually run this script from each node of your availability group, simply because of the way the accept logic works. I've been working on some enhancements to try to capture when the jobs don't exist in a reciprocal way, but so far the SQL has just kind of eluded me, and I always end up firing more alerts than I should. So for now, you'll need to run this on each member of your availability group to make sure that you capture all of the problems. So we're going to look at, we're going to grab our server name and object type. Those are our variables. And since this is a job, our parent flag is none. So because this is the parent level, there's nothing above this job to link to. But for a job schedule, it will have a parent ID, and for a job step, it will also have a parent ID. We're going to grab the name of the job, whether it's enabled, the starting step ID, the owner SID, and a bunch of notification parameters that are all in the sysjobs table to compare against. And then we're going to accept that from the first server in our set of linked servers for the availability group. So we're running the exact same query. We're just going to grab the linked server, and then anything that's unmatched there, we're going to put into the unmatched table. All right, and so we pretty much repeat that same process for the job steps, the job schedules, the operators, the alerts, notifications, which are tied into the alerts tables, and linked servers. Oh, and don't forget server principals or logins. So now that we've assembled all of those unmatched records, right? So we want to build the output report that will let you look at it and determine what you should be, give you an easy way to compare them. So we're going to continue through. We're going to run an update command to basically give you a query that will do the join for you across that linked server so that you can see the objects that are different. Now, the first thing we'll do is make sure that we note that if we found it on the primary, but not on the secondary, or I should say, if we found it on our current server, but not on the other servers, we want to make sure that we don't do anything if it's not there. So I don't want to create a record that says this job exists in both places. So you'll kind of get the gist of what I'm saying as we move down. So first we do an if exists. So if it does, we're going to show you the difference between the job on the primary. I should say, I keep saying primary, but I mean the current server and the server that we just looked at. If not, we'll simply print a message that says, here's the name of the job, and this job is missing from the other server that we looked at. And we basically take a very similar approach to all of the other areas of the server, the job steps, the job schedules, the linked servers, the logins, the notifications, the operators, everything like that. And at the very end, as we move through, this will only take another moment, I'm going to delete from my unmatched table any objects that I've put into my exceptions table. And then I'm going to do a select star from that unmatched table, ordered by the server name, and the object type. And I'm going to drop the drop that temporary table because it's no longer needed. So why don't we take a look here at our server and see what we come up with in terms of differences. So over here on the left, let's see if we're the primary server or the secondary server. We're currently the primary, so we're going to run this query from Duncan and see what happens. And apparently I put a number 4 in there somehow. Try again. So in my results window, you can see that I ended up with several different objects that are unmatched. Ended up with an alert, a job, a schedule, a job step, a linked server, and several server principals that were not matched. And over here on the far right, you can see I've built these queries that will let me check and see what those differences are. So I'm just going to copy those queries over and put them in a new query window. And we're going to run them. So when we look here, we get all of these results. Our first one is for our primary server, Duncan. The alert called bad alert is missing from the server Lato. And that's very similar for our jobs and the job schedule and the job step, missing from each of these primary, from the secondary server compared to the primary server. We also have a missing link server. So moving past that, let's look at where we have some differences. We have differences in server principals. Well, let's take a look here. This is the server principal name is the MS Policy Event Processing Login. I don't think I created that one. And that's actually a system created server principal. And so I have no control over what SID it gets at all, even though everything else matches up. And I have a similar problem with the MS Agent signing certificate. That's not there either. So we're going to go and we're going to add those to my exceptions table. So as you can see here, I've actually already created one of those. And let's just add it in. So we'll add the MS Agent signing certificate. And we'll add the other one as well. And we'll rerun our query. And as we'll see, those no longer appear. But we do have some things that we need to fix. So let's take a look at this job that I've very creatively named the missing job and see what we can do about that, right? So here's my missing job. It's in with my backup all databases and syspolicy purge history jobs, and see what's going on over on the Lato server. So that job just doesn't exist over there. Well, that's kind of annoying. Let's fix that, shall we? So we'll right-click, and we'll script the job as a create to a new window. We'll change our server connection to Lato. Connect. And let's add this job. All right, great. Now I have the missing job there, and if I refresh it, we should see it's exactly the same. And if we rerun our query, we should see that the missing job no longer appears. So let's see what happens. Indeed, it's gone. Right, but let's take a look at what happens if we make a small change to our missing job. Right now, our missing job has no steps. So let's just change the owner of the job to SA. Because, for example, if you went in and you said, "Well, I need to build this missing job." Oh, it's simple. It's just a backup job, and you simply right-clicked and created the job. You're more than likely to end up creating it under your ownership. So let's find out what happens when we have two different owners. Will it appear again? Ha. Oh yes, here it is. Our missing job is back. So let's take a look at our verification query and see if it'll show us what's different. So if we look at those, one right after the other, we can look very closely and see that the difference is readily apparent in the SID for the owner. And if you've worked with SQL Server enough, you'll recognize 0x01 as always the SID for the SA login. And here's some of our other columns, for that job. The notification levels for event log, for email, for NetSend, for pager, the email operator IDs, all of that sort of thing. So those have all, so what we need to do is we need to change our missing job, change the owner back to the domain owner that we had before. And if we just rerun this query that'll do the comparison for us, we'll see that now the two jobs are identical. So again, pretty easy for you to find and correct issues that may come up with anything in your availability group as far as the unsynchronized system objects. Now that is all I have for right now. I'd like to open the floor to questions. Mike, if you're getting any questions, or if anyone would like to submit questions now, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Okay, Joe, thanks. We do have a question here. Excuse me. There's a question. It can go a couple of different ways, but I'm going to ask it and see if someone will have a follow-up question on it. Do we need to maintain indexes in availability group on the secondary replica?
Oh, that's a good question. So any action that you take at a database level, such as rebuilding your indexes, such as dropping tables, things like that, they all get passed through to the secondary replica, which means you do need to be careful. If you have multiple secondary replicas and you're going to do a very data-intensive workload, such as rebuilding an index, you are going to generate a lot of traffic to your secondary replicas when you rebuild that index. But when you do rebuild it, or when you defragment it, the exact same thing will happen on the secondary replica as happened on the primary replica.
Cool.
I guess the answer is no, you don't need to maintain the indexes on the secondary. You couldn't even if you wanted to, because your secondary replicas are read-only and they're not able to be changed. The only way you can affect a change there is by doing things on the primary replica.
Quite a couple questions here. So the script that you're running, what versions does it work on? Does it work on 27 and the soon-to-be 2019? Do you know?
I have not played around with it on 2019. It should work on versions from 2012 all the way through 2017. The system tables for these objects have not changed appreciably between those versions. So the things that you're going to want to compare should be found in the script.
Great. Another question is, what do you think about server triggers in this process? Have you considered those?
A server trigger. So I guess if you wanted to set up a server trigger, oh, I see, to try to synchronize server triggers. That's a good question. It's something that I haven't done because I really haven't seen a lot of use of server triggers. And the times that I have seen them used, they tended to break things. But it's a good potential future enhancement. So I will take that under advisement, because you're right. That's another system level object that is not synchronized here.
Yeah, I thought that might be a future to do here, and a future version. Okay, so there are a lot of questions coming in. I'm trying to read through them here real quick.
Okay.
Some are comments, so I'm just trying to. Yeah, it's more of a comment. A lot of folks are saying thank you. They haven't figured out how to handle this kind of stuff. So today's session is really good. So you get that. Let's see. That's a different question. Does this script take into account the schedule GUID for the SQL Server agent?
The schedule GUID for the SQL Server agent. Well, let's take a look at what I'm capturing and comparing for the SQL Server agent job schedules, and maybe that will answer the question. And then if it does not, then maybe we'll have to take it offline and come back to it. So let me just actually do this. Okay, I'm looking in. Not sure why it's not finding schedule, because that's definitely in this script. Let's start at the top. Go through the step, and okay, so our job schedule. We are looking at the name, and then all of the. So we are not looking at any schedule GUIDs. We're again comparing them by name, and then if the then comparing up with the job owner. So, oh, I guess we do join the. Oh no, this is to the job. Yeah. So we don't compare the job schedule GUIDs at all. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for the person asking the question, but my email is on the slides. I'm very willing to talk and discuss where that might need to be adjusted.
Okay, yes, yeah, some of these things are kind of detailed that we can add. That's good to troubleshoot into that. Let's see here. There are quite a few comments in here, so I'm just trying to get back to that. And someone asked this question again, so I want you to answer it a second time here. Is this script you're running looks like 2012 here, but this script runs on SSMS 2017 and so forth?
Yes, I'm currently running this on a SQL Server 2014 multi-subnet availability group that I set up just to do demos and things like that. I haven't updated them to 2016 or 2017, but they should work just as well on those versions.
Okay. Also, does this consider the server roles in its detection?
Server roles, you know, that was something I think that I didn't consider, simply because for the longest time, creating new server roles wasn't something that you could do. But that does raise a good point, and is probably something that should be added.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and so for those of you who are asking, yes, the slides, the recording, and the demos will all be on the dba.pass.org website by this weekend. So if you want to kind of go look at those and grab those, they'll be available at that point. And with that, there's a bunch of other questions coming on, but they've kind of overlapped each other. So I think with that, Joe, we're going to, unless something else comes in, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, sir, for the great presentation. This is really good and timely to help us with this cool feature of availability groups. We sometimes have pieces that get left behind, but this helps us make sure everything goes over hook, line, and sinker. So that's really good.
Okay, well, thanks to everybody who joined today, and I hope we were able to answer most of your questions and help you out. If not, do feel free to drop me a line. It's joseph.fleming with 1M at straightpathsql.com, and I will attempt to answer any questions that I get. Thanks again, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.